and we are live once again for a conversation I've been looking forward to all week, part 2 of our ZK history series with our very own Diego Kingston. Diego, how are you today?
Hi, Boris. No, everything's going fine here. How's everything on your side?
Things are good. Busy, as I'm sure you know, but the weather is nice in Toronto. Happy to be home. It's not too hot. Lots of fun stuff happening, so no complaints.
Yeah, the weather's gotten way better in Buenos Aires. We
Oh
are
yeah.
approaching spring, so
Ooh, okay. Okay.
it's
Exciting.
going to be really nice.
Yeah, and I guess for DevConnect in November, it's going to be like summer weather, right?
Now it's going to be like fantastic.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, yeah, no. Also, good ice cream season. I should give my list of ice cream shops in Buenos Aires that you should try if you come here.
Yeah.
Um,
For everyone watching or listening, Diego is an expert on this topic. In addition to ZK, he's also an expert on ice cream in Buenos Aires.
yeah.
Yeah.
They say I never get lost when I have to go to an ice cream shop. Uh,
It's not a bad reputation. Yeah, and actually, well, since before we jump into the real cryptography, um, I remember you were talking about an event that we will be doing in DevConnect around ZK. Is that something we want to plug here, or?
yeah, no, we are still organizing it, but definitely we would love to have like um, the cryptographers and core engineers of several protocols come over and discuss um, several topics, some of the challenges we are facing, some of the solutions we are finding. I think that every time that we um, collaborate, we get to much better solutions. I think that CK's development was a bit halted by the fact that at some point there was not so much collaboration and even like uh, fierce competition.
Hmm.
And we could have gotten like the best of both worlds uh, way before. But I think now things are smoother. And I think that, for example, SNARKs um, got important improvements by the collaboration of several teams.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think that having like open source implementations and all that was key to that. Um, so if you come to look at it, maybe at first you had the Stone Prover, but at that time it was closed source, and then you had the Winterfell Prover, powered by people at then Facebook, that was fully open source. From there, you got the Maiden VM, and then other people took inspiration on that, and then you had other provers. You had people from Plonky 2, Plonky 3. At LambdaWorks, we also took a lot of inspiration from Winterfell and obviously from Stone. Um, but then people started saying, okay, you have this trick, or somebody uh, found a clever optimization, and I think that that helped a lot. In fact, one could have thought that, for example, Polygon and Starkware were competitors, but in fact, when the two teams got together, uh, we got some amazing improvements. For example, now we have lookups with logup and GKR, or we have circle starks, and those two are the result of a collaboration between two giants. Um, and from that, you get other things.
Yeah. So this is great. I feel like we're jumping ahead a little bit because this is exactly what I want to hear you share, like these different developments in more recent years. But before we do that, I think it'd be great to have a very quick speed run summary of what we covered last week. like the basic sort of stepping stones that got us to maybe 10 years ago in zk.
Okay. Yeah.
Quickly,
No, so we mentioned that in 1986 we had the paper on zk, the first one. We also mentioned that we had this interesting paper by Babai on logarithmic verification, showing that a weak computer could control what super powerful computers are doing if you have these succinct verification. You also have the subject protocol. You have a lot of theoretical developments on the side of probabilistically checkable proofs and all that. The only problem was that first, maybe you didn't have a compelling use case. Internet was not what it is now or was in the early 2000s. Also, like there were like some, I don't know, theoretical and practical concerns about some of the assumptions. And then, of course, we still lack like several of the key constructions or formalizations. Clearly, some ideas were there, but in general, when you are developing a theory or something, first you get like notions, but then you have to formalize that. And I think that we also got in the 90s, late 90s or something, like some developments in pairing-based cryptography. And that would help then in building the first efficient constructions because they relied on pairings. Yeah, and then we will get like more developments after the 2010s. But in 2008, you also had the GKR protocol. But the problem was, okay, we didn't have like a lot of like efficient libraries or in some cases even like compilers, because what you know is, okay, I can build if I have a snark for some NP complete problem, which we talked last time, well, then what I can do is take my NP statement, my NP problem, compile it to some instance of this NP complete problem, and then I can prove it. But it is not always that straightforward. Of course, there are things that you can express more easily, but if you want to prove a general computation, then you need a specialized compiler, and not all the alternatives you have are super efficient for proving. So it took.
Diego, I want to stop you there and ask a clarifying question. So, say we're in 2010. What, this is, some people already knew about crypto, knew about Bitcoin and blockchains, but people weren't thinking about the sort of cryptography in the same way that we think about it now. Scaling blockchains, maybe privacy apps on chain, stuff like that. What would somebody have been maybe trying to do with some of these cryptographic primitives 15 years ago, 16 years ago, that would have required them or had them try to implement it as code?
No, the thing is, for example, if you look at Pinocchio, which is like the first nearly practical instance of this, they were concerned with the problem of delegating computation. So say you cannot run a given computation because you are not powerful enough, but you could somehow delegate it to some untrusted server, but how do you know that that untrusted device is doing exactly what it is supposed to be doing? And of course, if you could get this proof back, then you just verify the proof and you know that the result is correct. Okay, which is similar to the thing you have in blockchain. The only thing is that the blockchain is in itself a verifiable computer because you have several nodes. Every node has to re-execute and reach consensus. And so there you have like some guarantees. The problem is if I am sending that to untrusted server 1, I don't have these redundancy and everything that will kind of help me. Of course, the blockchain then sacrifices computational speed for verifiability in the end. Now with ZK, what you get is somehow verifiability without necessarily sacrificing speed. I think that's like one of the core insights. But yeah, people were worried, okay, I have to do this, send this to this other computer. How do I know that they are doing things correctly?
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and you also have like some concerns about data. That's why you also got a lot of development in FHE. In fact, I think the first efficient construction for FHE must be around 2009, 2010, I think.
Interesting.
That is to say, to prove that you can do FHE, not that it is efficient, it took like ages to do. It was like half an hour per bit. So it was like super painful, but theoretically that was like super important because
And
it meant that it was possible.
yeah, and for people listening, FHE is fully homomorphic encryption, which actually, Diego, do you have a nice, concise definition for fully homomorphic encryption? I have one, but it's rambly. It's definitely not as good.
No, that is to say, if I had to explain that to somebody who's not into cryptography, I'd say that you can do math operations on encrypted data without having to decrypt it first. So the idea is, for example, I want to multiply two integers. What I can do is just encrypt them. And when I do the encrypted computation, I get a result that if I decrypt it, it's precisely the multiplication. And of course, then I can give my data to somebody else to do the computations for me, and he doesn't get any knowledge about that. And that's very important because sometimes you say, okay, I am sending this to this other server. How do I know that first it's not using my data or learning something from my data? I don't want to give my data for free, and people do something with that. Or even if they were like super honest and didn't care and everything, the problem is that when they decrypt or something, imagine that somebody hacks the server or something, and then somebody gets my information. In this case, what you get is precisely privacy
Yeah.
on the inputs and the output of the computation. But the thing is, you don't get a guarantee that they did exactly the computation that you wanted to do. That's what ZK can offer you. The problem is it's hard right now to get both things at the same time because each one adds a lot of overhead. So when you consider FHE on top of ZK, it's still super slow. But if you take a look, both technologies at first look like something like really strange and pretty inefficient. And in the last decade, they've gotten several orders of magnitude faster, and that was because they found some interesting use cases, and you could fund research and engineering teams to actually build and improve these things.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about zkFHE later in the sort of future crazy stuff part, which
Yeah.
would be cool to talk about. So, okay, thank you for explaining why people were interested in using zk even before blockchains. And as you were saying, the problem was there weren't very good compilers or ways to implement these primitives in code. So how did that start getting developed? Like what were the first things that made this technology a bit more usable, if that is even the next step after, say, Pinocchio or GKR?
Yeah, no. The thing was like first people were mostly interested in having something that has the zk property and not so much the succinctness, because they wanted to get like everything at the same time. And one important thing was, okay, they discovered that if you had like some offline pre-computations, then you could get these succinct arguments. Of course, you are saying, okay, you have to do like some setup and everything, but then you can reuse that to have efficiency. Also, people started like playing with maybe different arithmetizations. One that got particularly popular was R1CS, which stands for quadratic rank 1 constraint systems. Basically, what you do is you express the whole computation as a system of quadratic equations. And then what you want to prove is that you have a solution, a valid solution to that quadratic system of equations. And then you knew how you could transform uh, this to express it in the language of polynomials, because people realized, okay, I can easily transform these algebraic equations into an equation about polynomials just by interpolating using the FFT and then taking like some quotients. I want to show that this somehow evaluates to zero. So by showing that one polynomial is divisible by another polynomial, I can kind of reduce the checks there. And also, we had like efficient ways of kind of committing to polynomials, because you had the KZG polynomial commitment scheme from 2010, which needs some setup, but then you can check like some computations. The idea was people realize, okay, if I want to show that this is correct, maybe what I can show is this polynomial equals the product of these two polynomials, but that is expensive. So we can say, okay, we evaluate at one random point, and then we check the evaluations. And that is something that you can do very efficiently
Mhm.
with, for example, the KZG commitment. In fact, for those who don't know, the KZG commitment is used actually in blobs.
Yes, so I wanted to say that I first heard about the KZG commitment scheme because of the proto dank sharding ceremony, which I participated in. I think I have a POAP from it where you added entropy to the screen and contributed randomness to make sure that, you know, nobody lied and that the trusted setup was good, I guess. Which would be good to get your explanation on that a little bit more. Because you said R1CS, it's a arithmetization would you call it a scheme or arithmetization protocol?
Yeah, it's basically, instead of writing like typical code instructions, you say, okay, I want to do, I don't know, in this stage, A equals B XOR C. Okay, and then what I can do is, for example, say, okay, what does this equate? So what I can do is somehow say, okay, this string uh, is composed of bits. So what I can do is say, okay, each variable is a bit, and then each bit is constrained to be the XOR of each bit.
Hmm.
Of course, this strategy gives you a huge blow up, because I don't know, every variable I want to represent has to be represented by a field element, and I have to express like main equations. So that gives us um, a big blow up in some cases. That is to say, there are things that are very easy to express in terms of system of equations. For example, if I want to say field element A is the product of field element B times field element C, that is very easy. It's just one equation. If I want to say that something is the quotient of two things, that's also very easy to express as a system of quadratic equations. But then there are things that are like more complicated. If I want to say A is equal to B to the 600, then I need to express that as lots of equations, because each equation can only be of degree 2. But so this presents like a difficulty when you come to think about it, because programmers are used to writing like ordinary code, and then you have your compiler that somehow gets it to assembly language and then to machine instructions, and then it runs. Here, it's like I have to go and code in a kind of assembly and think, okay, each instruction should be expressed as some equations. And something that is interesting is that if you have to do several operations and you know how each one is arithmetized, then what you can do is just glue all the equations, which is something really nice, because then what you could do is basically write like the system of equations for each instruction and then glue them together. And that was the idea behind several DSLs.
Okay. Yes, domain-specific languages. So we're this is exactly where we're kind of moving towards, which is like how to actually write this stuff as code. I want to come back to KCG and polynomial commitment schemes, which feels like an important intermediary step after arithmetization. So once the program has been arithmetized, then you can do the polynomial commitments. That's like the next step here?
No.
No.
That is to say, you have the first step, which is I compiled my program to this system of equations. Obviously, one way you can check that you have the solution is I give you the solution and you just replace in every equation and check that everything is 0. The only problem is that is not succinct and that is not efficient. So we have to transform that into something that can be effectively checked. And one way we can do it is, for example, that doesn't mean this was like the strategy from the beginning, but more like the strategy we use now. So the idea is we can show that we have the solution or something by showing that a certain relationship between polynomials hold. Okay? So basically the idea would be that I, as a prover, can send you some polynomial, you answer back with some challenge, I give you back another polynomial, you send me a challenge, I give you another polynomial. Okay? The problem with that is to say that works, but the problem is I am sending you the whole polynomials and you have to read the whole polynomials. And that is pretty inconvenient. That is to say, what you would like, in fact, is just to read part of it or some information and not the whole information and still be able to be convinced. A similar idea you had with PCPs, where the idea is I send you like some strings and you don't have to read the whole string. You just have to query the string at some places and then you are convinced that things are correctly. So instead of like giving you the polynomials and making you read the whole polynomials, maybe what I can do is give you like Oracle access. Like imagine that I am sending that to some wise man. I'm giving him the polynomials, and then you can ask the wise man for some answers. And then from those answers, you do something. Of course, uh, we have to build something that behaves like that. And that's where the polynomial commitment scheme comes in. So the
Okay.
idea is, instead of giving you the whole polynomial, because that's like super expensive, what I can do is give you a commitment to the polynomial. So the idea of the commitment is that it binds me to that polynomial. That is to say, I cannot then say I change the polynomial, or I have another polynomial that commits to the same.
Hmm.
So it's important that it is like binding in my case. Of course, if I want to have something like zk, I would also like it to be uh, hiding, of course. Those are like the two key properties that you like in any commitment. But the idea of the polynomial commitment is that apart from those two properties, you have another one, which is being able to prove some evaluation or query to the polynomial. Okay? So what you can do is basically, with the information of the commitment plus some short proof, you can be convinced that I evaluated everything correctly. So in the end, what you'd have is something like, okay, instead of sending you polynomials, I am going to send you commitments. For example, one easy commitment would be, I evaluate the polynomial over a domain, and then I build one Merkle tree from those evaluations. So what I am doing is saying, okay, I am not going to change this list of evaluations, and then you can ask for any particular values that you may need. KCG does something similar, but instead uses elliptic curves to do that. But basically, it gives you a very short string representing the polynomial, and with the guarantee that I won't be able to produce another polynomial that has the same commitment. Okay, and then what you do is, okay, the idea is, after this, all these exchanges, this boils down in general to a relationship between polynomials. And here you have one of the key ingredients in many of these things, which is the Schwarz-Zippel lemma. Basically, it says that
Diego, can you say
if
that
you
again? The what dilemma?
Schwarz-Zippel.
Schwarz-Zippel
Uh,
lemma. Okay.
yes, basically what it says that if you have a polynomial of degree d and you are working over a field that is very, very large, the probability of you selecting at random a zero of the polynomial is negligible. Okay, basically, say you have like 2 to the 256 points, and your polynomial is of degree 2 to the 20. That is to say, well, you have like 1 million. Okay, I am going to pick one at random. The probability that I find something that makes the polynomial evaluate to 0 is essentially 0. Why?
Mhm.
Because there are only 1 million points that would give me 0, and 2 to the 256 minus 1 million, which is essentially 2 to the 256 points, that would give me a non-zero answer.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so basically it's like finding like a few atoms in the universe that would give you 0. It's kind of crazy, but okay, you use that then as a check, because checking things as polynomials is uh, complicated, but checking things as evaluations is really easy, because you know to multiply integers fast.
Mhm.
Multiplying polynomials, uh, takes a lot more work. And so in the end, it boils down to checking like some multiplication between some integers, which should be the evaluations of the polynomial. And that's where you use the idea that the polynomial commitment can convince you that my evaluations are correct.
Okay.
So that's kind of the strategy. It's like, okay, you have the system of equations, you boil it down to polynomials. I would send you polynomials, but that is expensive, so I am sending you commitments to polynomials. We get some challenges, and then you have a final check, which is there is some relationship between these polynomials evaluated at some random challenge, or maybe more than a random challenge. And so you say, okay, I don't need to know the polynomial to evaluate. I say, you gave me the commitment. Now give me proofs of evaluation. And the idea is that in general, these proofs can be batched very efficiently. And so essentially, for the price of just one proof or something, you can show that everything is correct. So that's more or less the key idea.
This is like the moon math secret sauce that makes zk work. Lets us prove this computation, basically.
Yeah, that is to say, you have variants, but in the end, if you look at them, they do more or less the same. And that's the idea behind the BCS compiler, where the idea is you have this, what they call the polynomial interactive oracle proof, which is just this uh, proof that we exchange like some polynomials, but instead of giving you polynomials, I give you oracle access. In practice, the oracle is not, I send this to this wise man, and then you go and ask the wise man for the answers. Is I use a commitment, a polynomial commitment scheme to instantiate the oracle. And I can render everything non-interactive just by using the fiat Shamir transformation. And so I don't need to have the verifier online. I just simulate using a random oracle.
Interesting. So this is the whole interactive versus non-interactive thing where it can be, yeah. Okay, cool. So this is early 2010s. These sorts of primitives are emerging and getting adopted. You wanted to, I cut you off when you were going to start talking about domain-specific languages that allowed people to write code using all of this, or rather, code that will get executed and proven using.
Well, actually, things are a bit trickier. So 2013, 14, you get Pinocchio, which is not like entirely efficient and everything because it has like lots of pairing checks and everything. But it shows that this is possible by leveraging like some pre-computation. And the idea is you can use R1CS to represent the program. And then you have like some way of, okay, transforming all these checks into like some checks between polynomials. That would be like the core idea, and evaluating at a random point that neither the prover nor the verifier knows, but that they can compute. That's because you have elliptic curves and you have pairings, okay? And so, of course, a line of thought could be, okay, I know that every operation can be expressed as some equations, and then what I can have is some compiler that reads the code and generates like the specific equations, and I know that I can glue everything. Of course, that doesn't mean that that is necessarily efficient. But you also have another way to go, which is instead of like taking all the instructions and go instruction by instruction, replacing by equations, what I can do is build a universal circuit, build, for example, a Turing complete machine, and prove that I ran correctly a program on top of that Turing complete machine. And then I just have to write just once the equations for the VM and everything. And then it's just showing that I ran correctly the program that I wanted to run on top of the virtual machine. And you had that idea, I think, from 2013. It was called SNARKs for C. From one of the authors was, of course, Eli. But the problem was that maybe some people would say, in the case of having a VM, you are paying a huge cost because there are like things that you are not going to be using at every step of the computation. And so it should be easier to somehow write like the circuit you are actually going to use at every step than just writing like the biggest circuit that encodes all possible operations that you could have and then simulate everything. So a bit of fast forwarding. Then in 2016, you get Groth 16, which is even more efficient than Pinocchio. The proofs are like super short. It's just two group elements from G1, one element from G2, plus the public input. So really efficient. The problem is you need to do a trusted setup for every program that you want to prove. Okay, it's efficient, but the problem is you have to do this ceremony. Of course, I think that in 2014, 15, you had Zcash, you had the zero cash paper, and then that transformed then into Zcash. I think, I don't know if at first they used like Pinocchio for some things, then of course they migrated to Groth 16, then you got like Halo 2, which are like more efficient constructions or that don't have some of the assumptions that we don't like. Having a trusted setup is not something that you'd want because you have to trust the setup that nobody cheated. And at the same time, if there is like some problem, especially in these cases where you have to perform a new setup for every program, if you had a bug, then you have to throw away everything and do again everything. So it's like pretty complicated.
Diego,
But
I wanted to interrupt for a second because this reminds me of the talk that we saw Jens Groth give last year at DogeCon. And he was telling the story how they published the 2016 paper. For people who are curious, Groth 16 is named after the guy who invented it, Jens Groth. Hence Groth 2016, Groth 16. But how he had published this, and then the next day, like crypto people were emailing him implementing this in code, and he was like, "Whoa," because that wasn't the intention originally.
Yeah, no, that is to say, if you look, the protocol is actually quite simple. That is to say, the most expensive part is actually generating the setup. Once you have the setup, yes, you have to compute like some polynomials and everything, but that depends on the circuit. The difficult part, I think, is getting the system of equations. Then the rest is you use FFT, and then you compute some quotients, and then you get the answers. It's not that difficult. That is to say, if you want, you can go to LambdaWorks and look at the code, and you'll see that the setup takes a lot of time, and you have to do lots of computations. But once you have, generating the proof is actually, if you have the circuit, you have the constraints and everything, it's pretty straightforward. It's just you do this, you divide, you commit. It's like easy. Uh, of course, getting to this efficient construction and everything was not easy. It took like
Mhm.
several years. But the difficult part, I think, is okay, how can I write uh, the program as an R1CS thing? Of course, then you got things like zircom or gnark to help you like write things.
Diego, quick
Mhm.
quick interjection. I have two questions for you that I think would be good to answer before moving forward. First question: what do you mean by a circuit? Like how can you define a circuit? This is something we hear about a lot in ZK, and you've said a few times now. But what is a ZK circuit?
No, it's really I say a circuit, but in the end is the system of equations. So the thing is, how do I get the system of equations from the code I want to prove? Um, and it's kind of a compiler in the end.
Okay.
Um, the thing why I say circuit is because uh, the idea was that to prove things, you represented them like an arithmetic circuit. That is to say, you can imagine like having some N3 wires with information, and
Mm-hmm.
then you get like some gates where you can do either multiplication or addition, and these get combined until you get from the final gates the output. Uh,
I see. So it's more of like
it's
a conceptual way to talk about all of the operations happening.
Yeah, in the end is because the circuit then gets or it can be shown to be equivalent to a system of equations. And then what we do is that system of equations, we transform it into relationships between like some polynomials, and then
Mhm.
we get the results. That's kind of the whole idea. That's why sometimes we say circuits, sometimes we say R1CS, air, whatever. It's just some representation of the computation that we want to take. I can show you that maybe a given circuit has different representations as systems of equations. That is because I can combine the equations in different ways and have something that represents exactly the same. But
Mhm.
in some cases, it may be more efficient. Sometimes you get systems that have like redundant equations. So it's not always that easy. And sometimes you may under constrain things. So it's not that easy. Of course, you could always say, okay, I add like more conditions, but the problem is those conditions don't add anything. They just add more work. And if you just happen to misconstrain something, then you have a problem.
Hmm.
Um, so of course, the first part, people were really concerned with circuits because we had everything with uh, R1CS, and having a way of writing circuits was perhaps a simpler choice. That is to say, people had to write these circuits by themselves or using Circom or whatever, but they thought they may get better performance, and using universal circuits looked like uh, paying a very high overhead and cost
Mhm.
for proving things. Of course, I mentioned you had SNARKs for C uh, since like the very beginning, and in 2019 or something, or 2020, you get the paper for the Cairo VM, or I should check really, but I think it's from Yeah, it's more like 2021, really, at least the
Okay.
version that. But clearly the idea was like uh from before they had been like thinking, can we make this uh and
So
it's
Diego,
kind of the
we're jumping ahead, right? So now you're talking about the Cairo VM and general purpose circuits, universal circuits. Again, spoiler alert, I guess we're talking about zkVMs or the Cairo VM. But before we get to that, can you introduce SNARKs? Because so far we mostly talked about SNARKs, but now we're getting towards SNARKs. So
yeah, but the thing is, I think that you understand better Starks if you also think it together with the idea of the virtual machine.
okay,
Um, that is to say, you can do Starks for uh, something like R1CS or use Fry for that. Um, but I think that Air offered like some advantages over R1CS because it allowed you to have like higher degree constraints, uh, which is something that you don't have in R1CS, or express like things in more complicated like expressions. And AIR
what
is
is
really good
what
for
is air?
something. AIR stands for algebraic intermediate representation.
Okay,
Basically, what you say is my computation has to fulfill these equations, and these equations apply at these steps. So AIR is a very natural way to arithmetize a virtual machine because basically what you could have is, for example, constraints that enforce that uh, the variable belongs to a certain type. For example, you want to show that a column corresponds to a Boolean variable. And so that's something easy to express because call x that variable, then x times one minus x should be equal to 0. And that should hold for every step in the computation. Then, of course, you have like in a virtual machine, you have the transition function, and we go from one state to the next state, and so on and so forth. So you could have like some constraints that represent these transitions and enforce that every register is updated correctly. And so the idea is that then using AIR, what you do is the idea behind AIR is you have a table that encodes the variables. Imagine that it represents each register in the VM. And then you have some other polynomial equations which say which variables are constrained at each step or at every n steps. And the idea is that when I plug the information in the trees inside these polynomial constraints, is if everything's right, it should all evaluate to 0. So the idea is I don't want to give you like the whole trace because that's expensive. So what I do is I interpolate each column of the trace. That gives me a polynomial. And the idea is then I can plug those polynomials inside the other polynomials, creating something that is called the composition polynomial. And I'd like to show that the composition polynomial is in fact something uh, that evaluates to 0 in a given domain. Um, and you can do that very efficiently by showing that the quotient between two polynomials is of low degree, is a polynomial of low degree. Um, and that's where you get Fry, which is precisely a test designed to prove that this is in fact close to a low degree polynomial. It's a proximity test. Um, and that makes the protocol really efficient. But if you take a look, at how air works, it fits very well in the idea of I have like a set of like registers, which corresponds to the registers of a virtual machine. And there are some conditions that they have to fulfill every time I jump from one cycle to the next. Okay. And SNARKs are pretty efficient. They have another advantage that since they work with Fry, which relies on Reed-Solomon codes and hash functions, you get a lot of freedom that you don't get in elliptic curve commitments. First, you don't need any trusted setup. You just have to agree with the verifier on the hash function and nothing else. And the security essentially is the security of the hash function, which is something that is better like established and does not depend on the difficulty of the discrete log as elliptic curves, but rather on other things. Okay. And that makes Fry post-quantum secure. Okay, because if you have to break it, you have to break hash functions, and given their construction and everything, the only improvement you get from quantum computers is Grover's algorithm that would essentially reduce the security, but you can always recover it by just taking larger digests in the hash function. And the other one is you are no longer constrained to an elliptic curve. The thing is, in SNARKs using elliptic curves, in the end, what you are proving is or using is field elements that are given by the elliptic curve. So once you chose the elliptic curve, you're married to that. And it's not that you have like lots of elliptic curves with efficiently computable pairings and secure and everything. That is to say, you can find, but you don't have as many choices. That is to say, once you chose it, you got those fields and you cannot change it. But in SNARKs, you're free to choose whatever field you like, so long as at some point you sample from a larger field. So the idea was, okay, what I can do is I can represent everything with variables from a small field. And whenever I need to draw a random challenge, I go to a larger field that contains the original one that is called a field extension. And that way I reduce a lot the overhead I have. There is just one condition that you have on the field, but that's for efficiency, which is that it should be something that we call a smooth field. But otherwise, you get a lot of freedom.
Okay. So universal circuits, zkVMs, they're using SNARKs is what you're saying for these purposes, or?
That is to say, people realize that is to say, what would you like as a developer? You would like to write code as you always did, and that then there is like some black box that gives you the proof. Okay, you don't want to go and have to code like in assembly language and go through a lot of pain and have something that is very bug prone. Okay, because that is to say, to be able to code these things, you have to have a lot of understanding. With the zkVM, the idea is, okay, you have the code written in a high-level language, and then that gets sent to this essentially black box that does all the cryptography and gives you a proof. Okay, So of course, some people were saying that this was going to be slow, uh, that circuits were more efficient, whatever. But what they missed was that Zk is going to be used like everywhere, and you cannot have like lots of cryptographers to be developing applications by writing efficient circuits and doing all the heavy work.
Hmm.
You need to develop lots of products and things, and you need to make it like really easy. So if you can then do like all the heavy work of okay, building the VM, ensuring that it is secure and everything, and you can prove quite efficiently, then you simplified uh, the development of new products. You don't have to spend that much money teaching people how to code circuits and having like expert people and everything. You can more or less do the same
Hmm.
uh, and work with the same engineers. It saves like a lot of time.
Yeah.
So when we learned about the Cairo VM and everything, we understood that it was like something really big. Of course, some people were saying, it's not that performant, whatever. Since then, it got like 100 or more times faster, just by using a bit of cryptography and also um, a lot of engineering. Uh,
And this is just in the past 4 years, right? Cairo VM paper you sent me. This is from 2021,
yeah,
August, August 2021. So
that is to say, some people were saying, okay, yes, the first version is slow. Obviously, you are building something new. It takes time. You have to try several things, analyze. It takes time, but I think it was like the right call. As soon as we saw it, it was like because it makes sense from an engineering and business point of view. It's simpler. You don't have to hire lots of cryptographers to code circuits, which is like super slow. It takes time, whatever. Maybe at some point, yes, having a specialized circuit and not paying the whole cost of the VM and everything might be better. But it's something that we've been saying with Mauro. That is to say, I, uh, I can tell you, code this in assembly and it will go like way faster. Yeah, but the problem is I don't have infinite time, infinite engineers, infinite money uh, to get the product out.
yeah,
Even if you told me it is like better, it may not really pay off. That is to say, I can get to build a product faster, deploy it, have people try it, see whether it has product market fit, if I have to change something or not. And then I can see whether, okay, yeah, it makes sense to spend a lot of time improving this because then it will be 10x or 100x faster. But if you tell me that I have to pay a lot of money, invest a lot of resources and lots of things just to get, I don't know, 2x,
hmm
that is to say, would you spend $3 million just to get 2x? Of course, the answer is depends, but really,
yeah,
you don't have like all the time to be like wasting resources.
totally.
So when we saw that, we said like, yeah, this is the way to go. Of course, we started wondering maybe is there a way to use some other instruction set architecture where we don't have to, because the thing with Cairo is it's really interesting because it shows that you can use a virtual machine to prove things, but what you need to do then is, okay, you have your high level language, which is Cairo, and then you have to compile it to something that you can prove. So then you have the idea that you lower it to Sierra, and then you lower Sierra to uh, the Cairo assembly, and what you end up proving in the end. And the problem is then you have to write the compiler from the high-level language to the other. The idea was that some people said, like, okay, but we have compilers for other things. Couldn't we prove, for example, RISC-V and take advantage of the existing compilers? And then you got like what we call general purpose zkVMs. But that's because there was something important, that you already had everything that you need to compile, I don't know, Rust to what you are going to actually prove.
Diego, so
Mhm.
I want to contextualize things for a second. One of the things you were talking about, which is, it was a big conversation topic, maybe like beginning of this year, late last year, general purpose zkVMs versus custom circuits. And I mean, you basically said this, but I wanted to just sort of add this, right? Like with general purpose zkVMs, universal circuits is another way you described it earlier. Anybody who can code in Rust or another language it supports can have provable code. They can do verifiable computation using the zkVM. It might be less efficient than a custom circuit that does this, but it's way more accessible. You can iterate faster. And the point you were making was that maybe if you do have millions and millions of users and you're spending a lot on the computation, then it is worth it to spend a lot of money, hire cryptographers, and create specialized circuits, because if you can make it 5 times cheaper or 5 times faster, this, maybe those are the same thing, this adds up a lot if you have a million people running this all the time.
Yeah, but it's not even that, because I don't know, if you see how engineering works and everything, what you're trying to do is build products, have people use them, and everything, and you cannot be like trying to build the most perfect, most efficient, whatever, because it's also like very like bug prone. Then you have to analyze the security and everything. So I don't know. I think that having zkVMs, of course, people doubted that this would be efficient. Luckily, we saw lots of improvements on the cryptography side that gave you like more freedom to choose the fields. Then we also got lookup arguments, which make it like more efficient to prove like some expensive computations by just showing, okay, the result is included in
Yeah.
this table. And really, that makes a lot of difference. Of course, um, maybe, for example, to show you a case where you might want to have something different is, now that Ethereum is working on lean Ethereum and having post-quantum secure signatures and everything, one of the alternatives they are exploring is having a dedicated, simple virtual machine that can do signature aggregation. Okay, basically what it does is it takes like some post-quantum secure signature or several, and some bits saying who are the validators signing, and then it generates a proof that all those signatures were verified. Okay, and so you can then continue aggregating those proofs, and eventually you get a proof that all these validators signed the message, and there is consensus. Okay, so in that case, you could use a general purpose VM, but the problem is maybe you are paying a huge cost, because you are saying, okay, I want to prove all this. Maybe having a specialized VM, okay, that consumes way less memory and that you can run it efficiently, even on your home computer, is important, because it's important in terms, for example, of decentralization. This means that anybody can run it, whereas maybe running a general purpose zkVM is too expensive for your laptop. Okay.
Yeah.
So then, of course, it makes sense, but that's because this is a core part of the protocol. It's simpler, perhaps easier to audit. It can only do very few things. And it's just because, okay, here efficiency really matters, and we need to ensure that we get very small proofs. So we want to do everything to be fast and have small proofs. So in this case, it makes sense to spend like some time developing something different. Of course, if you told me that zkVMs somehow got like 100% faster and proof sizes have decreased and peak memory consumption is, I don't know, 4 GB, well, then I don't know if it makes much sense to have a specialized VM because it's already fast. In the end, people, what they want is, I want to prove something, and I am going to use whatever makes it easier to develop and is sufficiently fast. When things are sufficiently fast, you don't care about being faster.
Hmm.
That is to say, what's the difference between getting something in 10 milliseconds or 1 millisecond? You don't care.
Hmm. And
You care about other things.
yeah.
It's the same as, okay, in some cases you use Rust because it offers like lots of advantages, but sometimes you prefer to use another language because it offers some other things and maybe it's better suited for the job.
Hmm.
Well, here it's more or less the same. People are going to use whatever suits best their needs and makes their development process and maintaining their code and everything easier.
Hmm.
Um, so it's been like really interesting to see that really at some point people were like didn't like Starks. They were like fighting for elliptic curves. They said that elliptic curves offered like some advantages and that. Now I think nobody discusses like zkVMs. People have a different point of view about Starks. You have the Ethereum Foundation even committing significant resources to prove some of the key conjectures uh, that could help, like reduce Stark proof sizes. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe in the future, Starks will be like first-class citizens and verifying Stark proofs will be like really cheap. Uh, and it's important that you had like several teams always pushing for this. Uh, I think it's good that Starknet always said, I am going to verify Stark proofs in Ethereum because I don't want to have a trusted setup." And that is something good because it shows that people don't compromise on what they consider like some core values, even though that means paying a bit more or a lot more. But they've been saying, Why would you have a trusted setup if you can have none?"
Yeah.
Um,
Better is better.
uh, yeah, in general, I think that less is always better, and you should strive for simplicity.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think that Starks, that is to say, you can have different Starks here. What we are emphasizing is proof systems that are in general like based on hash functions. Uh, have shown like remarkable performance, very good security properties, and you can see that Ethereum is trying to incorporate them more and more into the protocol to further simplify things. I think we are going to a world where Ethereum will eventually become just one big verifier. It will take CK proofs and just verify. Um,
Diego,
um,
we were talking about KCG commitments earlier, and how they're used in blobs. But this is not post-quantum secure, and this is something I haven't looked into, but for the data availability layer of Ethereum and blobs, what or the data layer in general, is there some sort of plan or some different research directions being explored that you know of to replace this with some post-quantum secure equivalent?
I haven't done like too much research on that, but I think it's for sure they're doing it because they want to have post quantum secure Ethereum.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't keep like blobs if they are completely broken.
Yeah.
So yeah, there will be like some different techniques for uh, data availability and all that,
Mhm,
but
mhm. Okay.
um,
Yeah. Diego, so the Cairo VM coming up 4 years ago, I've personally only really started paying close attention to zkVMs and these specific topics for about a year and a half. But I'm curious if you have any stories or insights to share around, say, the past 4 years. Like after the Cairo VM, what were the major moves that happened? Like RISC-0 was the first to have, um, Rust-based general purpose zkVM in production. But
yeah.
do you have any, I don't know, insights around the different teams that started working on this and the sort of competitive landscape? Is this something you were following?
Yeah, yeah. That is to say, you are right that RISC-0 was perhaps the first one to propose this general purpose RISC-V VM.
Mhm.
Then you had like some teams maybe fighting for having a WASM VM. You also had like some efforts from Valida uh, taking advantage of like several developments there. You also had a lot of zkEVMs, but as you can see now from the calls and everything, it seems that zkVMs are clearly winning over zkEVMs. Um, then you had, of course, Jolt, uh, which said like, okay, let's use multilinear polynomials, sum check, and make everything one big lookup. Uh,
Hmm.
and that was something really interesting. I think that uh, Justin Taylor took a gamble, and it was the right call. Now a lot of people are migrating to multilinear uh,
Yeah,
polynomial based things.
SP1
Um,
uses that, right?
yeah, SP1, I think that um, was also important because it was very performant and has shown then like significant increases in performance. Then when they released this hypercube and we had like for the first time real-time proving, okay, using lots of GPUs, power consumption really high, but still,
Still, yeah.
I think these are important things in the development showing that you can do it. Then I think engineering is going to take care and reduce uh, the use of resources and everything. Um, but I think that was great. But if you see, uh, really soon you got other teams getting like real time proving. Um, Now I think that of course we have to address not only increases in performance and everything, but also continue focusing on security, also in making uh, the code bases way simpler, because we still get bugs from the VMs from time to time. Some are not like super critical or not super exploitable, but others are. And the bad thing is here that We have that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So we are never sure where there are no further bugs. So
There's always a possibility that there's something you don't know about.
I,
Yeah.
I don't know from that is to say we worked on that. We found uh, bugs that, for example, allowed us to prove that we were a Satoshi. Uh, and it happens and that is to say you're always going to get bugs in any project. The thing is how you approach the bugs and what are your policies to prevent those. And you have to be extra vigilant, use all the tools that you have. Formal verification is important, but you also have fuzzing. Uh, and I don't know, sometimes they break your things by the most unexpected means.
Fuzzing.
Uh, yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes people are like playing or doing something and then they do something and they break it. And it's like, it's not that they understand cryptography. They just touch things and it broke.
Yeah.
Uh,
Just mess with it until something happens. Yeah. I actually, I remember a really fun conversation I had with Mauro. And for those of you listening, Mauro is another one of our co-founders and our head of engineering, or CTO. And he has a sort of security and like hacking background. And he was explaining to me how like hacking software actually works, and helping me understand fuzzing and everything. And I think that could be a very cool stream to do, like zkVM security or zk security in general. Um, Getting him and you on here to talk about this. But I wanted to zoom into something, or maybe to wrap things up and talk about the future of Ethereum and how zk is involved in this. So we've been attending the ETH Proofs calls, and for people listening, the ETH Proofs initiative it's something from the EF, which is like an open source comparison of different zkVMs for proving Ethereum blocks. It's like a big part of Ethereum becoming, fully zkified at every layer, and this is focused on execution. Um, so they do talk about security quite a bit and the importance of having multiple zkVMs, just like we have client diversity in Ethereum. So a bug doesn't take down every validator. Similarly, we want diversity in provers and in the sort of like backend that different provers use. If they're all using Plonky 3, I don't know if backend's the right term, but if they're all using Plonky 3, then a bug in Plonky 3 takes down all the zkVMs. So just like we want client diversity for validators, we want zkVM diversity, prover diversity. Um, Diego, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, yeah, just how zk is transforming Ethereum at different levels, the things you're excited about. I mean, we feel strongly, and we believe this is where things are going. But yeah, your thoughts, please.
no, I think that it's going to be very nice see the transformation of Ethereum into this lean version that has a very minimalistic code base and basically uh, is kind of the truth layer of internet verifying secret proofs that are like post-quantum secure. Um so I think that that is something like really interesting, and if we can get to the objectives, having this chain that is like very simple, very minimalistic, and that it can be coded by, I don't know, some undergrad during summer, it would be great because this means that the protocol is very simple. Um, Much like happens in Bitcoin, I think that Bitcoin has been very successful at explaining what it is and what it has to offer. And if you come to think about it, Bitcoin is like really easy to understand. And I think that we are going to get people to understand what Ethereum is, how it works, and why it is important. And we are going to see more institutional actors building on top of Ethereum. Some people right now are maybe taking uh, like the option of building their own L1, but I don't know. I think that Ethereum has lots of things to offer, and it's easier to tap into this liquidity and also in this amazing pool of developers, researchers, engineers. Ethereum, I think, has gotten like through the hard road of building a highly decentralized, resilient infrastructure, not compromising on core values, but at the same time adopting um, like new developments and trying to ensure that the protocol remains secure in the face of new threats and for the years to come. Um, so I don't know. And the good thing is Ethereum belongs to all. It's completely open source. You have like client diversity. We will have zkVM diversity, proving backend but diversity.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that we will see like all value transfer in the internet eventually going through Ethereum or some other blockchain. But I think that Ethereum is going to become a core protocol
Yeah.
of the internet. So I think that we saw like some great changes in the last few years. I think that we can still get a lot more. There are still like some developments. We also have to formalize some security notions and everything. But you can see the amount of people that are gathered in Ethereum participating in the discussions. Um, and it takes like sometimes time for some debates. For example, SNARKs was a big fight. I think that right now people realized of some of the advantages of Starks, which was not perhaps the popular take. That is to say, I think that Ailey favored two things when building Starks. One was ensuring that he had something that was post-quantum secure. The other thing was not having a trusted setup.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see, many went for the other thing. They favored like privacy first and having shorter proofs, but they had to compromise on other things. They had to forsake post-quantum security. They had trusted setup. Uh, and yeah, we got like some debates, but it was good that we got some very good engineering implementations and that we could show that with Starks we got more freedom to choose some parameters and that we could go like much faster.
Yeah. I completely agree with you on the, I mean, everything you're saying. Very bullish for Ethereum. This is now just me saying a lot of things that we already talked about a lot. We work on Ethereum for a reason. It's because we believe it is one of the most ambitious projects that humanity is sort of taking on right now, on the internet at least. And it's really being built, for the very long term, like thousands of years, maybe, hopefully, right? Like the when talking to a lot of people about why they work on Ethereum, the core values of Ethereum often come up. The community, the people involved in working on it, it is truly decentralized and censorship resistant and secure, which is why I think we're seeing institutions adopt this for their banking rails. And why I'm very puzzled by some of the big companies announcing their own L1s recently, like Google today talking about their L1, Stripe announcing one recently, Circle, USDC announcing one. These are all very puzzling, and I mean, I understand there's business cases for them wanting to do this, but they
Yeah,
seem a little short-sighted.
yeah, I don't know. That is to say, if I could choose between a decentralized L1 and a centralized L1, I would definitely go with the decentralized
Yeah, as a
L1.
user. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
and one that and one that has had like 100% uptime,
yeah,
has like a lot of client diversity and everything. Of course, maybe for some use cases, having a centralized L2 is like good enough, but
yeah.
I wouldn't compromise on
No,
the L1. That's why we are building a blockchain. If not,
exactly.
I don't know. Just
Exactly.
have you just have your centralized database.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Stripe's customers. Now we're just, now we're just talking about industry stuff. But I want to talk to you about this, like, because I've been thinking about it and haven't really discussed it with anyone. Stripe's customers, they don't really care about decentralization. They're using Stripe anywhere. It's a payment processor, right? So from Stripe's perspective, they must see their own blockchain be having some benefits for their infrastructure, for their business processes. Maybe it's cheaper, whatever. But then it loses a lot of the network effects of Ethereum, right? Like, I'm sure there's benefits to them having a blockchain as their rails, but by being their own L1, I think they're missing out on a lot of the stuff that would be useful to them. So I'm very curious about this. Like, I really don't know. Um,
Yeah, but I don't know. I am very bullish on Ethereum. I think that we
okay.
have a very ambitious like roadmap, and Ethereum has been pioneering on CK technology. Now other blockchains are starting to say we are going to add CK, but Ethereum has been trying to add it for a longer time, has been giving a
Yeah.
lot of discussions, investing in research and everything. And now I think we are like collecting the rewards. Um, and none of these would have been possible without Ethereum pushing for these things. And so I don't know. We'll have to see, but it's clear that important actors want to come to blockchain, and we'll see what happens. But I think that blockchain already is offering things uh, that break the rules of the old internet and how money works.
Yeah.
And let's hope to continue on that trend.
And all of our bullish conversation around Ethereum during our hour and a half here, it's gone up almost 1%. So maybe we should keep streaming.
Okay.
um, yes. Well, okay, Diego, this has been great. I could talk to you for many more hours, but I don't want to keep you all day. So maybe I'll just add some closing notes for anybody who's listening now or later on. This is part 2 of our History of ZK series with our co-founder and head of research, Diego. Part 1 and this part 2 are going to be on YouTube. We're also going to have some nice clips to cut from this. From my end, just if anybody has guests they'd like to see on these streams, let me know. You can find me on Telegram in the Align group or on Twitter. And yeah, thank you for watching. Diego, do you have some closing notes?
Yeah, we didn't cover things, for example, like folding schemes. Uh, we also forgot to mention in the VM side. I just remember Maiden. That is to say, I was talking about Winterfell and everything, but Maiden has been also very important in the development. They did like or took some interesting design choices. Uh, and now they are like launching their chain and everything. I think it's very interesting because they are one of the few to have actual privacy. On DSLs, maybe we could have talked a little bit more about Noir and Aztec.
Aztec, yes, of course. Am I frozen or is Diego frozen? All right. Diego's frozen. I don't know who's still watching. I can see the total number of viewers, but let's see if he comes back. And if not, we'll maybe wrap things up. Oh, Diego, you
I mentioned.
You said
Yeah,
Aztec.
I mentioned Noir and it went black. But it's a different approach to privacy. Yeah, and I think that if we wanted to do justice to everybody, this would have taken a lot longer. I recommend you going through some of the papers and looking at some of the projects. I think they all had very nice or interesting takes. Some, of course, have led perhaps now to better results, but still many of them played a very important role in the development of this. You have lots of lookup arguments. I don't know. At some point, we need to write the book on zk and other things. And yeah, but I think it's also nice when you get to hear the main characters of all this. So getting Ellie to talk about SNARKs or Shafi Goldwasser on all work, or Dan Bonnet. It's interesting because they've been in the discussions for a long time. And then it's like the same when you are in a new scientific field and you get to talk with somebody who's been maybe 20, 30 years giving discussions, and then he can tell you, oh, yeah, this, we thought at first that this was going to work, then we realized. So thanks a lot, Boris.
Diego, this was a pleasure. No, we need to get you to write some blog posts with some greatest hits reading lists of papers. I think that would make for some good content. And my last thought is I have had that experience before, meeting people in my field in biology who have, made major discoveries and have been working on things I'd been working on it for a few years. They'd been working on it for decades, and chatting with them, and they're saying, oh yeah, this other guy, he burned out like 5 postdocs and grad students trying to isolate this thing or purify it, and none of them were able to do it. So they're like, if your approach works, that'll be very cool, because many years were spent trying to purify this structure in the cell nucleus. And I was like, wow, that is cool to hear about. I'm like, I wasn't even in high school when people were trying to do this, and this old guy is telling me about another old guy who's very famous. Lots of fun. Diego, I digress, but thank you again, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks. See you. Bye-bye.